Welcome to the One Question Leadership Podcast. My name is Dr. Patty Robbie Keller, and I'm the Sports Administration Program Director at Boston College. I manage the Masters in Sports Administration. What I love about our program and leading our program is that all our faculty work in sports. Our students get the excellent experience that they bring to the table, the education, and their network. So when our students leave our program, most of them are already set up with a job in sports. We give you open opportunities to find so many different avenues to work in sport. Our program is very explosive and dynamic, and we hope you come and check us out. Our entire program is $42,000 a year, and it can be done in 18 months, online or in person. Thank you for listening, and enjoy the episode.
Greetings, this is Ty Brown, and welcome to the One Question Leadership Podcast, where we highlight executive leadership in college athletics. I am joined here by Kim Record. She's a Senior Associate Commissioner at the A10 and recently took on the title of Chief of Staff, which is interesting. You've been in the industry for a long time. You spent 12 years, I believe, at UNCG and a veteran leader and well-respected in the industry. So I'm happy to have you on here on the podcast.
Well, thank you. I'm happy to be here.
All right. Tell me about conference life compared to campus life.
It's different.
Okay.
It's very different. I think I knew going in, and one of my concerns or wonders about moving to a conference was how different would it be, and not having student athletes, not having coaches around. I knew that would be something that I would miss. One of the positives is you're rooting for not one team. You're rooting for, in our case, 15. And so and at any contest, you win.
Mm-hmm. This is a year into the role?
Just a little over a year.
Yeah. So tell me the adjustment period of that, of not interacting with student athletes or specifically with coaches, and how long did it take to get adjusted to that? I mean, and also, I guess a follow-up to that is, I mean, do you get more sleep now than you did as the athletic director?
I thought I was going to get more sleep. I think that the differences in our industry has changed so much during my time in it. And so the time spent, it's just a different type of work, I guess would be the best way to put it. You don't necessarily work 24/7.
Okay.
You don't have events every single weekend. However, particularly in this time of such tumultuous change, every day you still walk in the office and it is something new, which I enjoy. And that was definitely the way it was on campus.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. Senior Associate Commissioner. So you just took on the role of Chief of Staff, but I wonder what area we were hired for when she brought you in.
Well, I think I've been very fortunate to work with a lot of great leaders over my time. And I tell people I grew up in the ACC. I went to school at Virginia. I worked there. Had the good fortune to work with Dave Hart at Florida State before becoming an athletic director at UNCG. Mm-hmm. So when I had the opportunity to work with Bernadette McGlade, who is one of the most well-respected leaders in our industry, I came on board to do a couple of different things, governance and compliance. My background really was more the external operations side. And so we've gone through quite a bit of change over the last 18 months. We moved our offices from Newport News, Virginia to Washington, D.C. And so anytime there's change, it's an opportunity. And so the role really is a little bit of everything, anything. I do HR. I support the commissioner on a day-to-day basis as a member of the executive team. And really, it's some things haven't changed. I think that in this world of athletics, you support your head coach, which is the commissioner, and you do what the job takes.
Yeah, so she's almost like a catch-all, like help me run this thing kind of situation.
That'd probably be a good way to put it. If there's nowhere for it to go, perhaps you go there. And I think that I would consider myself a generalist now, so I know a lot about or no, I know a little bit
About
about a lot of
yeah.
things. So for the most part, can pitch in where necessary.
Yeah. Is there something that that has shown up more often over the last year?
Um, I don't know if it's so much shown up more often. I think that when you go from leading a team of 80 staff with 250 student athletes to we are a 15-member team. However, we have 15 schools that we serve, very similar on a day-to-day basis. And I believe in teaching and learning. And for me, it was always about giving back. And so we're fortunate to have a wide range of staff with a variety of gifts and skills. And so learning how to become a team together is always a critical part of that process.
And there's a few new people in the office too, right? So
There are. We have, out of our 15 staff, I want to say 9 or 10 have less than 18 months experience
Wow. Yeah.
at the A10. However, they are very seasoned veterans in their own right. And so we're fortunate that moving into this new world, as we all are talking about, we have folks who have experienced a lot, both of successes, of challenges, and know that sometimes it takes a little bit of time to get exactly where you want to go.
Yeah. I can, from my perspective, bringing someone like you in, especially when you have 9 out of 15 people who are new, makes sense to me, especially if you're someone like the commissioner who's been there for a while and have to always operate at 50,000 feet. But if half of your staff is turned over, you got to onboard the people and make sure everybody's tuned in to everything. And that it's kind of hard to do both of those at the same time, which can be done and probably has been done. But bringing somebody like you with the depth and breadth of experience you have, it's probably definitely have been an asset.
Well, I hope so. I think that, again, having been an athletic director, knowing sort of what the Atlantic 10 stands for and where we want to go, it's important to know what your values are. It's important to live those values, be consistent. And probably one of the biggest challenges, I think, for anyone who moves into a conference office is your lens changes. So what you may have made a decision about on a campus, your decision may be slightly different based on that conference lens, because you have to be very careful about making sure everyone feels like they're being treated equitably. And so being on the same page is important.
Yeah, I think that is. Would you say that is the biggest learning point that you've had to do? Or what would you say is the biggest? Because like you said, if you're a teacher and about developing people, then you're probably also a learner and always trying to learn something.
Continual learner.
Yeah.
I am. I think it's the active listening. I think what I have learned and gives me a little bit of a different perspective is having sat in that athletic director's chair and also having been a deputy or a number 2 for a number of years. And with the exception of finance, which was not an area that I ever directly oversaw, which was fine.
Yeah.
Understanding that listening is very important. Understanding the decision-making process, and there are different types of decisions that have to be made. And when you're asked for your opinion, you better give it. Because if you don't, then don't come back and say you didn't ask. Now, that doesn't mean that you're going to get what you want. But the best decisions, I believe, are made through consensus and gathering other people's perspectives through their different lenses.
Yeah, I agree with that. The lack of a better word, onboarding process. How long did it take you to learn how Bernadette liked to receive information and to help her make the decision she needed to make?
Well, Well, as I said, I've known her for a very long time, and
it's different than working for her now.
Oh, it's definitely
Right.
it's definitely different. And people will say, "Well, do you miss being, the boss or the
all that stuff?"
And I've been a great number two. I've worked with some great athletic directors, Jim Copeland at Virginia, who has no longer with us, Dave Hart at Florida State, and they're all different. And so I think it's someone gave me some really great advice one time is that when you're working with a new leader, you go in and the questions may sound funny, but how do you like to receive feedback?
Right.
When do you want to receive feedback? Do you want to know the bad stuff that may be out there being said? And getting those answers, because trust is the bottom line of any kind of relationship. And so taking time, it's been a year. I think we know each other well enough that we do work well together. Are there times that we both still have to challenge one another to communicate effectively? Sure. But if we didn't have that, that could be boring, and we wouldn't be as effective for the league as we could be. So that's healthy. That's healthy. Maybe uncomfortable, but sometimes it's generally healthy.
Yeah, boring is a hilarious word, right?
Boring, yeah. I don't know. I in my entire career, I don't know that I'd ever said that anything was boring.
But that's fine. And there's one thing you're talking about is, there has to be a little bit of friction, right, to get to the best decision, I think. And it doesn't have to be acrimonious. It doesn't have to be angst,
but so, you hear so many different things. But again, when you get hired, or I would say this to staff, I'm hiring you to make decisions and to make me better. If I wanted somebody just like me, I would have hired somebody just like me. But if you have a bunch of me's, I wouldn't say boring, but it is that friction.
Yeah.
It is that give and take to get to the best decision. And so some of the most difficult hires I ever made were people that were very different from me, and it was uncomfortable. But at the end of the day, and we're still friends and colleagues to this day, we can laugh about how that first 18 months was not fun,
right.
But we made some pretty good decisions.
Yeah, made things happen at a high level. So I had you on a podcast we were doing with Athletic Director U, and it was a kind of a book review type thing. And I reached out to Tiffany Tucker and asked her, so have you read this book? Or what books have you read? And if you were to review the book with somebody who's a senior leader and pick their brain on the concept of the book, who would it be? And you were the first name she said, which is why I reached out to you and had you on the podcast. And I think it was a Brene Brown, but I don't remember exactly what book.
Brene Brown, one of my favorites.
Yep. And of course, Tiffany has become an athletic director now, which I think is excellent. And I wonder about that aspect, because one of the first things you said when we sat down here was about teaching and leading and mentoring. So I wonder about that when you talk about helping people to understand about leadership and then to go off and become leaders on their own, right? You learned from Dave Hart and the athletic director of Virginia you mentioned. Tell me about that aspect of you and your philosophy. And is there some semblance of that now that you're on the conference office?
Sure. I mean, coming to women leaders, I've seen people already that I have not seen in quite some time. Some who I worked with that have gone on and are leaders in their own right. Younger, less seasoned staff that I may not have worked with for a long time, but came up today and said thank you. And so it reminds you that you don't always know when you're touching someone. I could also, this is for a podcast for another day for you, go talk to Tanya Vogel, who recently retired at George Washington. I met her on the women's soccer committee, and I'm a book person. So, but I gave her a book. This has been 20 years ago.
Really?
I gave her The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team.
Yeah.
And at the time, she was coaching. I thought it was a great gift based on what we talked about. Yeah. It wasn't until, fast forward 20 years, she's an athletic director in the A10. I see her, we're chatting, and she mentions, you you gave me that book. And I was like, oh, yeah, I know. She goes, I wasn't quite sure what you were trying to tell me.
Wow.
However, I do believe that books are important. I give a lot of books, but to what you asked, it's the people that we meet and the ones that we know we have an impact on and are proud of. I look at people and I'm proud of where they are and the small part that I may have played. But it's equally as important the parts that you play that you never even know.
No, right.
So it's always why people say, you're always on your best behavior or, put your best foot forward.
Right. Never get a second chance to make a first impression. So I wonder about that in the Atlantic 10 office. I mean, I imagine some of the turnover were people who were young and up and coming. And so tell me, do you have the opportunities to do that with the staff there at the?
I think so. I hope so. I think one of the things that's been fun as I'm a seasoned professional, and we have a lot of young professionals, of sort of meeting them where they are, and hoping to be able to find ways to communicate. With technology, with everything that is new, that I can continue to learn from them. And my hope is that they feel like they can learn from me. And there's a meet in the middle there. But no, it's important to me that they be successful. And so part of my job, in addition to the real job and all the other things, is to be there to give them strategies on how to communicate, whether it be with an athletic director or a coach or a commissioner, or just listen to what they may be going through. I might not completely understand it or think that it's not as important as they think it is. However, when I was 28 years old, 32 years old, those things mattered. And so, yes, I continue to think that's important, and I will continue to do this until I feel like I can't be effective in that way anymore.
I got to ask a couple of questions, then we'll wrap. The first one is, being on a year out, I imagine there may still be athletic directors that, especially now that you're off campus, they probably did it when they were on campus too, but that call you to ask about advice on decisions they may have to make. Do you still get calls like that?
Sure.
Yeah.
I get calls. I make calls. I think that is one of the coolest things about, and I'm sure lots of industries are like this, but I can tell you that there are 5 or 6 people that if they call me, I pick up the phone. Todd Turner is one of them.
Yep.
So, and he may be recommending somebody for a job, and I might roll my eyes and he won't see that. But I'm going to listen because of the impact that he had on my life. And then when there are things that are going on, and I laugh now, my biggest one is technology. I pick up the phone and I call people who are more well-versed in the use of all of this technology. And I'm like, help me, help me. They laugh, but we get through that. So yes, that's important.
Excellent. All right, last question here. You're in a room, and you have probably done this actually. You're in a room full of people who want to be leaders or who are current leaders, and they're looking for 1 or 2 things to help them get over the hump or to become more efficient and better at what it is they do in terms of leadership. What do you give them?
I do believe active listening. I wish I'd learned that skill earlier in my career, listening
Did you
and
talk
empathy.
over people? What happened back then?
Absolutely, I did.
It's hilarious.
Absolutely, I did.
Yeah.
And I can say that knowing that, and I don't regret anything in my career. I learned from every challenge. I learned from coaches, but I think that active listening and truly listening and being present, and then having empathy. I think being empathetic is critical, particularly in this day and age. It's not as black and white. I never was the compliance person. I will say compliance is everyone's responsibilities, but we live in the gray.
Yep.
And for someone that's black and white, explaining how gray can be helpful. So those would be the 2 things.
Yeah, those are excellent. Active listening and empathy, which tie together beautifully, right? Well, Kim, this has been an excellent conversation. I really appreciate you joining us here on the One Question Leadership Podcast.
Well, thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am. That was Kim Record. Kim is the Senior Associate Commissioner and Chief of Staff at the Atlantic 10 Conference. And of course, I'm Ty Brown with one question. And keep in mind, the role of a leader is to create and maintain an environment that people want to be a part of. And as always, be better tomorrow than you are today. This episode of the One Question Leadership Podcast is produced by Spades Media Group, solving problems using creative leadership.